All right, now, you see the title of the sermon. Last week I did intend to close out all the speaking about the subjects of Zion, Jerusalem, and the USA, specifically the land of the USA as being the Zion in Bible prophecy. But I have had some questions about these sermons as of late. I figured I'd just go ahead and close it out with the last bit of the questions. Actually, I had some even from our physical congregants here concerning Zion and Jerusalem. So what they were asking is, and this has been, I've been asked this more than once, what they wanted to know is, are there any differences between Jerusalem and Zion? And if there's not any differences, then are the prophetic terms Zion and Jerusalem interchangeable then? And I did go through some verses last week, and it would seem that they are interchangeable. We're going to investigate that this morning. So we'll start in Isaiah 2, verses 1 through 3. The word of the Lord that Isaiah the son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem, and it shall come to pass in the last days, so we know immediately, this is end-time prophecy, that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and like we've discussed before, this would be the chief nation of Israel, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it, and many people shall go and say, Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of God of Jacob, and he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. So see, here's a verse where both Zion and Jerusalem, the prophetic Zion and Jerusalem are mentioned. You see, so we have this verse here, and I know we've gone over it many times before, but what we can establish from this verse is that somewhere on the earth, people of all nations are going to come to the Israelite people and ask to be taught the ways of the Lord. So we know that. Of course, this is end-time prophecy. And here it says, out of Zion will go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. So we see that there are differences, at least, in this verse alone. You see, so we'll investigate those. And we already know that Micah 4 is basically an identical prophecy, almost word for word, to Isaiah 2. We're going to look at Micah 4, verse 2, just to show you. And many nations shall come and say, Come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, and to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth out of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. You see, that's parallel passages in Micah. And we'll look at verse 7. And I will make her that halted a remnant, and her that was cast afar off a strong nation, and the Lord shall reign over them in Mount Zion, from henceforth even forever. Okay, so we're going to get a little deeper now. So this verse tells us that the Lord will reign in Zion at this time. What time? End time prophecy. So this would be the beginning then of the perfected kingdom. You see, because the Lord will be reigning there. We read this verse last week. And thou, O tower of the flock, the stronghold of the daughter of Zion. See, we're in end time prophecy still. Unto thee shall it come, even the first dominion. The kingdom shall come to the daughter of Jerusalem. So now we're starting to see a difference, because apparently the dominion, the first dominion, shall come to the daughter of Zion, and the kingdom to the daughter of Jerusalem. So there is a difference. They're addressed separately, you see. And you'll remember last week we linked that tower of the flock to a parable told by Jesus. Remember, it was the same thing. All right, and it says the dominion was to come to Zion. So from this verse, we see then, we're beginning to see the difference already. Now look at Micah 4:9. Now why dost thou cry aloud, thou, daughter of Zion? Is there no king in thee? Is thy counselor perished? For pangs have taken thee as a woman in travail. Okay, so he's asking a question. He's talking about Zion and Jerusalem, and one or the other is going to have deliverance and restoration. And he mentions here that there's something wrong, that they're in pain, they're crying aloud, birth pangs, all right? And before we move on to verse 10, I was actually going to read something I found interesting. In the Keys to the Kingdom Bible, we've been looking at this as we're studying through the book of Matthew for our morning Bible studies, and he actually links this, whether it was on purpose or not, but he does link, in his translation, I believe, Jesus' words with these end-time prophecies. You understand, Jesus did quote end-time prophecy quite a little bit. All right, so he in Matthew 24, we're talking about Jesus. He's talking to his disciples, so we'll start in verse 3. And he, Jesus of course, was sitting on the Mount of Olives. The disciples came to him alone, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your magisterial presence and of the completion of the eon?" You see, that's correctly translated, the end of the world, the end of the age, you see. And in answer, Jesus said to them, "Watch that nobody should lead you adrift, for many will come trading on my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will deceive many. But you will hear of wars and rumors about wars. Be vigilant. Do not be terrified, for these things have yet to come to pass, but the end is not yet." So we understand Jesus is talking about the end of the age. "For nation will be roused against nation, and the kingdom against kingdom, and there are going to be famines and plagues and earthquakes in various places, but these are the beginning of birth pangs." You see how he translated that? So Jesus is talking about what? Birth pangs concerning the beginning of the perfected kingdom. And we were just talking about how Jesus this morning in Matthew was telling us about we can discern seasons, like when the fig trees to bud. Therefore, we can discern the end of the age is at the door. And here we're talking about birth pangs. So something wonderful is going to occur, but there must be pain and travailing in birth pains at least before that happens. Of course, the next wonderful thing is the kingdom age, you see. So birth pangs. Micah 4:10, "Be in pain and labor to bring forth." Labor to bring forth what? The kingdom. Who? "O daughter of Zion, like a woman in travail, for now shalt thou go forth out of the city, and thou shalt dwell in the field, and thou shalt go even to Babylon." Even to Babylon. "There shalt thou be delivered. There the Lord shall redeem thee from the hand of thine enemies." So, this seems to be happening to the daughter of Zion. Okay, so who's in birth pain? Who's travailing? The daughter of Zion. Okay, we haven't mentioned Jerusalem. We're still talking about Zion in these verses. Of course, here he talked about that there was no kings or counselors there as well. All right, so this verse follows up the contrast we saw where Micah was talking about a time when God would rule in Zion, and then he says Zion is going to be in great and terrible trouble. You see? Even to the extent that this daughter of Zion will go to Babylon. And if you look in verses 11, 12, and 13 of Micah, you'll see the rest of the chapter, Zion is the one being talked about, not Jerusalem. Jerusalem's not mentioned again in this chapter. In fact, Jerusalem's only mentioned once, and that was at the end of verse 2. So let's check our history now to see if we can find out the difference between Zion and Jerusalem. We're going to go to 2 Samuel chapter 5, verses 4 and 5. "David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years in Hebron. He reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem he reigned 30 and 3 years over all Israel and Judah." Okay, and this is, when I was asked this question last week in person, I immediately began saying the difference between Zion and Jerusalem, and I led out with, well, it took David a very long time to rule over a united kingdom, didn't it? Okay, shadows and types. We're going to get ahead of ourselves. I keep going, so we'll just stick to the script. So, concerning David's reign, we see that there's a division here. He first reigned from Hebron 7.5 years, and then later took Jerusalem. So at the beginning of his reign, he did not rule the city of Jerusalem. Okay, so that's the turning point. That's where we're going to start looking at the differences between prophetic Zion and prophetic Jerusalem. Because David would be a shadow and type of this, and the kingdom, as a matter of fact. Look at verses 6 and 7. "And the king and his men went to Jerusalem unto the Jebusites." And remember, the Jebusites controlled the territory, okay? And the Jebusites were Canaanites. "The inhabitants of the land, which spake unto David, saying, Except thou take away the blind and the lame, thou shalt not come in hither, thinking David cannot come in hither. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, the same is the city of David." Okay, so Jerusalem was called Jebus while it was under the control of the Jebusites. Jebus is the old name for Jerusalem as we know it now. And it was not called Jerusalem until after Israel conquered it. Okay? And as a matter of fact, Jerusalem, the name Jerusalem, when you're talking about that city, is the most often named for that city. You can also get Jebus sometimes if you're talking about the old name, and also sometimes it's shortened to Salem. Salem, okay, city of peace, right? Okay. And the Jebusites were taunting David and his men. You see what they're saying? Well, David's not much of a threat because even the blind and the lame can ward him off, because they knew that Jerusalem, or Jebus, was a well-fortified city with high walls. And you can actually see, if you look at 1 Chronicles, you'll see that when David was going to become king, when he was campaigning to become king and unite Israel under one rulership, every single one of the tribes are represented in the story of 1 Chronicles as offering their aid and support to King David. You'll see he garnered the support of all 12 tribes. Okay, so they supported David's claim to the throne. And that would be 1 Chronicles chapter 12. So biblically, the tribes of Israel supported David. Why? 3 reasons. 1, David's identity. David was a true Israelite, so he was one of them. That's why the tribes knew to support him as king. Also, David had illustrated great military prowess when leading Saul's armies. Remember, he led Saul's armies during the Philistine Wars. Okay? And then, of course, the obvious reason is David was anointed king by Samuel. Yes. So God's word told them that David was to be king. So that's why the tribes supported him. So the Jebusites here said that David was no threat. Even the blind and the lame could ward him off. So in other words, this would be child's play to that city should he attack it. How? Verse 8. And David said on that day, whosoever getteth up to the gutter and smiteth the Jebusites and the lame and the blind that are hated of David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. Wherefore they said, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house. So David's offering a promotion to one of his officers if they can go and smite the Jebusites, you see? And that word gutter in the King James should be translated water shaft or shaft. Okay? And you see here how David took the city of Jebus. He went up through here, the Gihon Spring, here, up this vertical shaft. That's what he's talking about. Now, some Bibles actually translate that word gutter to grappling hook. Okay? Grappling hook. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. David was nobody's fool. I'm sure he knew, as we do, if you were to take a grappling hook and scale the wall, he'd just be shot. So it's not grappling hook, it's gutter or water shaft here, okay? Water shaft. It's actually now called the Warren Shaft. It was named after the 19th century archaeologist who dug it up, Warren, okay? Now, that would be Charles Warren. And of course, now you can see, and you should have already remembered Hezekiah. Remember King Hezekiah? Now, he didn't come in this way, I guess, because after David got in, they figured they need to watch that a little better. They may have posted guards here, who knows. Hezekiah dug this way and came in. He dug a new tunnel to get there. So he didn't just copycat David. All right, so anyway, Hezekiah came through here and went up. David came through here, climbed the shaft. That's why he's saying, whoever can get up this and get into the city, smite the Jebusites, you'll be promoted. And you know that would have been Joab that did that, right? That was Joab that did that, the captain. Okay. So, this is one of the few theories about how David actually took Jebus or Jerusalem. It's just a theory, but according to what we read in the Bible, and according to what the archaeologists have found, this seems to be what David was talking about. It would have been a secret way into the city to take the city, overwhelm the guards, and then run and open the gate and let the rest of them in. Okay? Now, he could have just taken the city. It's called the Siege of Jebus. He could have just cut off the water supply, knowing that was the way to conquer them too. But with the Bible verses and what's been dug up, they say that David and his men came up here, opened the gate, and that's how they got in. All right. Anyway, 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 8. And David said on that day, whosoever, okay, we read that one. So we know from this verse that the water system was the key in David's campaign to take the city. And he did take it. Okay? That's what we know. Verse 9, so David dwelt in the fort and called it the city of David. And David built round about from Milo and inward. Okay, so David took the city. There he is, through the water system. And of course, here I have a city, a map of what these verses are talking about. Now you understand after, this is just the Jebus. Jerusalem as we know it now is huge. If you look at maps before the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, Jerusalem actually went out. It's a big square, and this is actually in the southeast portion of the city, okay? But anyway, what they're talking about is here's where David came in, because we see the spring pool. He came in here, opened the gate, and let the troops in, right? And he's talking about Milo. He built up Milo, okay? So this is physically the stronghold of Zion. If you look at your maps, the stronghold of Zion is physically outside of this, which David took first. He took that first, Mount Zion, then took the fort, Jebus, renamed it the city of David, which would be Jerusalem, right? So we know he took that first, and verse 9 said that David built up the area around it, the Milo. And we saw that word Milo here. There, that's actually a Hebrew word meaning what is full, or what fills the gap. So David actually built up supporting terraces here. By modern terms, we'd call those retaining walls with leveled filling, right, to support structures on top. And if you read through the different kings and how they ruled Jerusalem, what would eventually be built here? Solomon's temple. David couldn't build it. Why? He was a man of war. He'd shed blood, right? He wanted to build a building for the Ark of the Covenant is what he was after, right? So Solomon's temple would be here. And then, of course, the supporting terraces were all built up. That's the Milo. And if you read through the kings as they went along, they actually kept building and improving the city. And you'll read all about that as you talk about Solomon's reign and all that, okay? And David's palace, if you keep reading in our chapter, David's palace here was actually built by Hiram, king of Tyre, who was who? Phoenicians. Phoenicians, okay. The Phoenicians are coastal neighbors, known for being seafarers, merchant marines, right? They were expert carpenters and stonemasons, and they are the ones that sent the timbers, which were the cedars of Lebanon, to build this temple. Okay, we'll look at that later. All right, now, 2 Samuel verse 8, okay. These verses here, if you wanted to read what I was talking about, are about David's military campaigns. Once David took Jebus, he took Mount Zion first, and then what we know as Jerusalem later. If you read through these verses in 2 Samuel chapter 8, you'll find that David fought and defeated enemies of Israel over and over and over. Verse after verse, he went in and campaigned against the enemies round about them and defeated them. And it's interesting because David actually, being the military man he was, left behind garrisons to occupy. Okay, it's just like what we have in nowadays with our modern military forces. Marines invade, army occupies. Okay, so he left forces to occupy enemy territory. And that's what he did through these verses. And then, of course, in 8:15, and David reigned over all of Israel, so he's got the kingdom now, and it took him a long time to get there. And you think even longer when he, as a young man, was anointed by Samuel. Took David forever to get united Israel and king over them. And David did what? Executed judgment and justice unto all his people. So we see here, during David's reign, at least in this first portion, David did primarily two things. What he did here, and what we read in 8:15, he defeated the enemies of Israel. And as verse 15 says, he executed judgment and justice in Israel. What does that mean? He put God's laws, statutes, and judgments into effect over the Israel people as king, okay? And if you read Psalms, particularly Psalm 119, which you won't hear too much in churches nowadays, you'll see that David kept and respected the law. Okay, so David did this, one of his first moves. And you see, we'll find out, I have a book here to read, but one of David's things that what he was most concerned with was fortifying the city, first things first, defeating the enemies round about him, leaving garrisons behind to make sure they weren't ambushed, and then second, as king, God's law. All right? So in David's time then, The law went forth from Zion. Right? From Zion. Now you're beginning to see. All right, Zechariah 1, 14, verses 14 through 17. So the angel that communed with me said unto me, Cry thou, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I am jealous for Jerusalem and for Zion. So you see, there's separate entities with a great jealousy, and I am very sore displeased with the heathen that are at ease, for I was but a little displeased, and they helped forward the affliction. Therefore, thus saith the Lord, I am returned to Jerusalem with mercies. My house shall be built in it, saith the Lord of hosts, and a line shall be stretched forth upon Jerusalem. Cry yet, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, my cities through prosperity, that word prosperity can be translated good, prosperity shall be spread abroad, and the Lord shall yet comfort Zion, and shall yet choose Jerusalem. Now, if you hear these verses at all anymore in the modern church, they are used for Zionism as we know it today. They say, isn't it wonderful? God has chosen Jerusalem and Zion for those Jews, and he's going to give that land prosper. He's going to make the land prosper, and he's going to make sure they all get back to their homeland. I've seen this verse used that way. I actually have. So, these, like I said, these are used to demonstrate the Jewish homeland. Okay, Jewish homeland of old Palestine and Jerusalem. And obviously that's a farce right off the bat. If you ever get these read to you that way, point this out immediately. First of all, the word cities is plural. So that's not just Jerusalem then, is it? Second of all, prosperity or goodness is going to be there. Is Jerusalem more than one city? No. Is it prosperous? Is it blessed? No. Did God choose Jerusalem? For destruction, yeah, but not for good. Right? Don't let him use that verse against you. It should be plain. He has not comforted Jerusalem. He's not comforted Zion. And they say Zion is over there as well. It's just misnamed, right? And it's the opposite. God didn't choose that land over there. It should be obvious because its inhabitants hate Jesus. Okay, and nowhere in this Bible can you find a page that mentions God blessing disobedience. You won't find it. Zechariah 2, verses 1 through 4. I lifted up mine eyes again and looked, and behold a man with a measuring line in his hand. Then said I, Whither goest thou? And he said unto me, To measure Jerusalem, to see what is the breadth thereof, and what is the length thereof. And behold, the angel that talked with me went forth, and another angel went out to meet him, and said unto him, Run, speak this young man, saying, Jerusalem shall be inhabited as towns, plural, without walls, for the multitude of men and cattle therein. Can this apply to the Jerusalem of old? No, it cannot. No, it cannot. So it takes an angel to measure this Jerusalem, this new Jerusalem. It has towns. It's in a place of safety. So in other words, no fortifications are needed. Okay? All right? And the angel measuring a city should remind you of something that occurs in the New Testament as well, right? Okay, Revelation 21, verse 2. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. That New Jerusalem's the church, isn't it? No, it's not. The New Jerusalem is the bride of Christ, not the Gentile church. Just get that out of the way. So we know we're talking about the New Jerusalem now. This is end time prophecy, visions of John. Look at verses 9 and 10. And there came unto me one of the seven angels, which had the seven vials full of the seven last plagues, and talked with me, saying, Come hither, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. So this is what the bride, the Lamb's wife, is. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. The bride of Christ is the New Jerusalem, not the body of the church. Okay? All right, not the body of born-again believers, because that's what you're going to hear in church nowadays. And here, I'm not mixing up, I'm not twisting scriptures. This is cut, copy, and pasted from the King James. The bride of Christ is that great city, the New Jerusalem. Now watch this city and watch what happens to it. 21:15. And he that talked with me had a golden reed to measure the city and the gates thereof and the wall thereof. Okay. So in Zechariah, we see the same thing. The angel in Zechariah was measuring what? The New Jerusalem. The angel in John's vision of Revelation is measuring what? The New Jerusalem. It's the same angel. It takes an angel to measure this new city. It's the same city, you see? All right. Now, this New Jerusalem then is not going to be in the old land, and apparently it's going to have more than one town. It's going to be more than one city, and it's going to be much larger than the old land or the old city. Okay? So what's the difference between Zion and Jerusalem then? Micah 4:8, and thou, O tower of the flock, the stronghold of the daughter of Zion, unto thee shall it come, even the first dominion, and the kingdom shall come to the daughter of Jerusalem. Remember, the Lord's house was established in the daughter of Zion, and the kingdom was to come to the daughter of Jerusalem. So these are two separate entities. 4:10, be in pain and labor to bring forth, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in travail, for now shalt thou go forth out of the city, and thou shalt dwell in the field, and thou shalt go even to Babylon. The daughter of Zion is to go to Babylon. So, Zion was what, according to our Bible history? Zion was the ruling place of David, from where the law went forth, right? It was the seat of government. So old Mount Zion, or the city of David, was a capital within Jerusalem from where the law came forth, right? If you think about it that way. Now, if New Jerusalem, this land, if we have New Jerusalem is this land, the North American continent, from where does our law go forth? Where would our Zion be? Washington, D.C. Not Zion Hill, Capitol Hill, right? So we have in time regathered Israel. Have we, in this land, gone unto Babylon? Okay, yes. Babylon is what? Now we're in time prophecy, so in time prophecy, Babylon is indicative of economic, political, and religious control. If you go to, right, old Babylon, once again, if you go to the New Testament, she gets rebranded as Mystery Babylon. Okay, prophetic entity. So Zion being talked about by Micah and Zechariah is to be under the control of Babylon. If you parallel that Babylon with what I was just saying, Revelation 17, you'll find it's named Mystery Babylon, and that's what? That great city that rules over all the kings or governments of the earth, right? So you have a place in the land of Jerusalem, where Israelites dwell, a New Jerusalem, from where the law comes forth in that land, which would be Washington, D.C., apparently, according to end-time prophecy, our nation's capital in this land will be controlled by Babylon. Right? Is that correct? Okay, right. You guys are all agreeing. So here in America, where is the control of Babylon most evident and most complete? You can say small government. Yes, I know, in the different branches. But where do the laws that dictate religion, our schools, crime and punishment, finances, medical care, race and society, where do these laws come from? Washington, D.C. Now, are those Babylonian laws? Yes. You bet. Has Zion gone unto Babylon? Yes. Has Washington, D.C. gone unto Babylon? There's the difference. There's the difference. And you can only imagine then what would happen if God's law came forth from Zion in this age. That would be the kingdom age, would it not? That's exactly what the prophets are talking about. The nation's capital is under the control of Mystery Babylon the Great. When Christ reigns in Zion, the law will go forth from there instead. That's the kingdom age. That's the kingdom age. That's the difference between Zion and Babylon. But in spite of all this, we read that the word of the Lord is to go out from Jerusalem. So yes, our nation's capital is under the control of Babylon. Does God's word from this go out from this land to the earth? At the same time, Zion is controlled by Babylon. Yes, it does. Who sins millions of Bibles out across the globe. The American Bible Institute is one of them. The name, right, comes forth. Does God's word come out of the land of Jerusalem? Yes, while at the same time the rulers are controlled by Babylon. Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, I went to we donated some books to the Gospel Mission. And I was talking to the guy, and I told him, I was like, look, I have a lot of duplicate books here, and you guys know our bookstore is just full of just duplicate books. And some of the books are far too large to be sending out. It's not cost effective for you or me to send you a 9-10 pound concordance. But I told the guy, I don't want to donate them because they're really good books, and I'm afraid that we've pretty much slam-packed Goodwill and some of the thrift stores with our duplicate books. I said, look, I think they're going to start knowing me because, my truck is fairly conspicuous. And so I told him, I don't want to throw these away. He's like, look, man, I have people that come into the Gospel Mission that have been in the church for a long time, and they've studied the Bible, and they want better study materials. I'm like, I've got you covered. I mean, we've got Haley's Bible handbooks given to them. We've got Bible dictionaries. So he was very happy to get those. He said, I honestly don't need Bibles. There are organizations in the nation that box up books and boxes and boxes and boxes of nothing but Bibles and ship and walk around the country and give out just boxes of Bibles to anybody that needs them. Boxes of them. Boxes of them. And that's happening where? Jerusalem, the new Jerusalem. So the word of the Lord is going out from Jerusalem. It is. So yes, the place from where Jerusalem is ruled has gone to Babylon. Zion is actually with Babylon. Isn't that what Micah said? Okay, Micah 4:9. We'll see. Now why dost thou cry aloud? Is there no king in thee? Is thy counselor perished? For pangs have taken thee as a woman in travail. Is the nation in trouble then? Are we in pain? Yes. Have we cried aloud? Yes. The true rulership of Zion is not in control of the king. You see? That's the question. Well, yes, we have a ruler. He has counselors. If you have kings and rulers, then why are you in pain? Well, because the king and ruler is under the control of Babylon. That's why we're in trouble. If the king did what King David did and made sure God's law was put into effect, I don't think we'd have so much trouble in the nation. As a matter of fact, I know we wouldn't, and all of you know that. Right? All of you know that. Now, does it up to Pastor Reed to do that? No. Now, I know Pastor Sheldon Emery would go to Capitol Hill and tell those men these things, and it does have an effect. Yes. However, it will be God's time and God's ways that this is cleaned out. Okay? So, Micah 4, verse 11. Now also, many nations are gathered against thee. Who? Daughter of Zion, that say, let her be defiled, and let our eye look upon Zion. If you were enemy nations gathered against God's Christian Israel, where would you go to establish control first? Zion, the seat of government. We already saw this in Jesus' days. The Pharisees and Sadducees sat where? Moses' seat. They controlled the religion and controlled the people. And our enemies are no fools. According to this, enemy nations will want to control Zion, because if you control Zion, you control the Israel people. Right? I'm convinced. Our nation is under the control of Mystery Babylon the Great, as all the prophecies tell us very clearly. Now notice Micah didn't say Jerusalem was under the control of Babylon. He said Zion was. Beginning to see the difference. Yes. All right. But there is hope. Actually, I forgot to mention something that I was going to read. Here. When we were talking about David's military campaigns, do you remember that? We were talking about how he was taking the, I got the information, a lot of it from this book, Digging Up Jerusalem by Kathleen Kenyon. Not that Kenyon, the pyramid guy, but this is another one, Kenyon. She was a British archaeologist, and she was saying some interesting things. I thought that was interesting. So he was talking about David's capture of Jerusalem is recorded in 2 Samuel 5, verses 6 through 8. And we looked at that with the water shaft and all that, right? And another version in Chronicles 11, the only addition is, and David said, whoever smiteth the Jebusites first shall be chief and captain. So Joab, the son of Zeruiah, went up first and was chief. Okay, so he's the guy that actually went there and did that. It can therefore be concluded that the Jebusites considered their defenses impregnable against any still fairly minor threat from the Israelite tribes. Their defenses were penetrated by a water route, and everything points to this as having been the route to the spring Gihon that was already been described in the earliest access to the essential water supply of Jerusalem. And we know that. Joab's feat in climbing the shaft must have been greater than that of Warren. Remember, that was Charles Warren, a 19th century archaeologist who unearthed this shaft. For he could have expected an enemy around every corner, therefore he fully earned his reward of being made chief and captain. So that's what Joab did. Joab penetrated the defenses that we have located on the east side of the lines, which I've suggested elsewhere. The terse biblical account shows that the penetration took the Jebusites completely by surprise, and the town fell to David. So this is how they think David ended the siege of Jebus. David's next concern was to secure his position in Jerusalem. This was in fact of very great importance to him. In Hebron to the south, or in Shiloh and Shechem to the north, he was dealing with leading towns of confederacies which had selected him as leader, but had their own tribal allegiance. Jerusalem was his city by right of conquest. All right, and we were talking about that in Jerusalem. But this is a little odd, I thought. The biblical accounts also suggest that David built a palace. In 2 Samuel 5, verse 11, it's stated, and Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David and cedar trees, also carpenters and masons who built David's house. The 1 Chronicles 14:1 account is almost word for word the same. And David must have had a space cleared in the Jebusite town, but the size of his residence is unlikely to have been great, for anything grandiose would have taken too much space within the restricted area of the Davidic city. And we saw that. David did. Jerusalem spread out after that. The city of David's a small portion of it. All right. The residence cleared was considered inadequate by Solomon, for he built his own palace. The reference to the masons and carpenters from Phoenicia is interesting evidence of the lack of building techniques among the Israelites, which reappears when Solomon undertook the building of the temple in his own palaces. So this lady here says that the Israelites weren't all that great at building. We had to borrow help from the Phoenicians. Of course, she doesn't realize the Phoenicians are one of our own. And she also must have forgotten that we built the tabernacle. She must have even forgotten we built the pyramids. Slave labor, I know. But everywhere you go, remember I talking about Solomon improving the cities and all the kings after that? Everywhere you go and see the Israelites in history, they build up and improve everywhere. And she goes on to say, and it's actually fascinating, she traces the tribes, but I have no idea who they are. The Danites were experts in military warfare and strategy. If you read the Iliad and the Odyssey, you'll find all about it. Those guys were awesome. And of course, Odysseus, strictly off script, if you read in Odysseus, he had to get back home, right? You know the Odyssey? One of the biggest feats Odysseus did while he was trying to get back home was build a ship from scratch to get off that island. And as a matter of fact, young boys wanted to be like the hero Odysseus because a man's man could build a ship. Sounds like Israelites to me. No, we didn't have to borrow labor from our coastal neighbors. They were our own people. You're only going to find the builder race doing those sorts of things. Merchant marines and seafarers. Historical, legendary. Okay, and we were talking about, and I missed that, so I apologize for that. But anyway, we're looking here that if you were going to control God's people in New Jerusalem, you would start on Capitol Hill to be under the control of Mystery Babylon, economic, political, and religious, and military world power. All right. Now, Zechariah, and I said there is hope. Micah 4, verse 12 and 13. But they, the enemies, of course, who've confederated against Zion, they know not the thoughts of the Lord, neither understand they his counsel. For he shall gather them as sheaves into the floor. Arise and thresh, O daughter of Zion, for I will make thine horn iron, and I will make thy hoofs brass, and thou shalt beat in pieces many people, and I will consecrate their gain unto the Lord, and their substance unto the Lord of the whole earth. This should remind you of Isaiah 51, where he tells the Israel people that they are his battle axe. With them he will shatter nations. Right? Again, end time prophecy concerning the daughter of Zion. And of course, Zechariah says the same. Zechariah 2, verse 10 and 11. Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for lo I come, and I will dwell in the midst of thee, saith the Lord. And many nations shall be joined in the Lord in that day, and shall be my people, and I will dwell in the midst of thee, and thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts has sent me unto thee. So here is end-time prophecy about the beginning of the kingdom after the enemies of the daughter of Zion are put down. Right? Both Micah and Zechariah communicate that this will happen when? After Zion is dwelling with Babylon. After. This is when this is to occur. All this will be done away with when the Lord dwells in Zion. You see? Because when the Lord dwells in Zion, what happens? God's law goes forth. Look at Joel. We'll close in Joel 3, verse 16 and 17. The Lord also shall roar out of Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth shall shake, but the Lord will be the hope of his people and the strength of the children of Israel. So shall ye know that I am the Lord your God, dwelling in Zion, my holy mountain. Then shall Jerusalem be holy, and there shall no strangers pass through her any more. That is what happens when God dwells in Zion. So yes, Zion is dwelling with Babylon. One day, God will dwell in Zion, and this is end-time kingdom prophecy about Zion, God's holy nation being restored. Restoration once again. Because we know that we cannot have a holy nation or a holy land while Zion is yet under the control of Babylon. It cannot happen. When God dwells in Zion, then shall Jerusalem be holy, and look, no strangers shall pass through her anymore. That's our great hope, and that's the kingdom age. We'll close in prayer. Father, our God, we thank you for this gathering we've had there this morning, God, and I thank you that we were able to get your word out to those who will hear and to those who will believe, God. We understand that we are your children, and you have coveted this land and this nation, God, and we know that when you return to dwell on Mount Zion, the kingdom will be here, God, and there shall be no pain or tears. We thank you for this knowledge, God, and we pray that you'll give us the strength to be your light as we go out and spread this good news of the gospel of the kingdom to our brothers and fellow nations. We thank you for this in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.